right, good afternoon. Oops, sorry. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Florida Statewide Standardized Assessments information and updates for students with visual impairments. This is focused more on new teachers and anyone who would like a refresher about the way that statewide assessments are conducted for our students. So again, like Tiffany said, feel free to ask any questions that you may have. Type them in the chat box and we will get to them as soon as we see them, basically. So, okay, here we go. Okay, so first is, wait, hold on one second. That must be coming up. Okay, so here's our agenda. So just so you can kind of get a feel for what we're going to cover, we will move through all these different items. And again, there's always time for you to ask questions. Okay. Okay. This event is being recorded and you will be able to find the link, I believe, in about a week under the FIMC's past event webpage. And there's a link inside the PowerPoint that has just been posted in your chat box as well. Okay. All right, now you can earn credit for this webinar. Here's the objectives of the webinar. We're going to talk about the Florida statewide assessments and give you information specific to our students with visual impairments, as well as any assessment related resources. So I do have the magic code that I know you're all waiting to write down, and that is testing. Okay, testing. And we will tell you at the end of the meeting how to get credit. Okay. All right, so important, it's very, very important that you attend this webinar in addition to any assessment training that you will receive in your district. This does not take the place of anything that the district offers for assessment training. Okay, this information is much more specific to our students with visual impairments and how they access the assessments and any kind of special accommodations that may exist for them. Okay. All right, so here is our overview of Florida's standardized statewide assessment programs. All right, so we use all these acronyms throughout the presentation. Most of them will be familiar to you, but if they're not, feel free to come back and reference these. BEST relates to the benchmarks for excellent student thinking, ELA, English language arts or reading. EOC is the end of course exams or assessments. FAAPT is the Florida Alternate Assessment Performance Task. FAST, Florida Assessment of Student Thinking. FAST STAR is grades K to 2, Florida Assessment of Student Thinking. The FCLE is the Florida Civic Literacy Examination, and SS stands for Social Studies. Okay, now for FAST and BEST, ELA refers to reading, and BEST writing for grades 4 to 10 stands alone. Okay, but with the FAA, ELA includes both reading and writing. Okay, so on this slide here, you'll be able to see all the different grade levels that take the different assessments. All right, so note here though that ELA and writing are separate. And the scores will be separate. The writing score will not contribute to the overall ELA score. All right. And there is no kindergarten STAR reading because most kindergarten students take STAR Early Lit, which cannot be administered on paper due to the nature of the test. Okay. FAST STAR and FAST are given during PM1, which is fall, PM2 winter, and PM3 spring. Science, grades 5 and 8 are given in spring. And the end of course exams, civics, biology, US history, algebra 1, and geometry are given spring, summer, fall, and winter. Okay. Remember, if you have any questions, let us know. Okay. All right, the Florida Alternate Assessment, you'll see here that ELA includes reading and writing and is given grades 3 through 10. And writing though is 4 through 10. So you'll know there's no writing in the 3rd grade ELA, even for FAA. We will this year be adding an FAA webinar on September 10th from 9 until 10:30 a.m. if you are interested in learning more about FAA, for those that also are test administrators for that. Okay, so Every test goes through the item development process. All right. And you can see the process here. It has gone through some revisions, but it hasn't changed a lot in the last few years. So, and every test has its own little process, but again, most go through this intense review system. So this slide specifically came from a presentation by Raquel Harrell, the Executive Director of the Test Development Center, or TDC, at the Bias and Community Sensitivity Review meeting in September of 23. So FIMC helps by attending the Bias Review Committee. You'll see that on the second yellow square here, which usually occur in June and September. In the bias and sensitivity reviews meetings, attendees are looking at the content and graphics used for items to ensure that they will not be biased against students in various population groups, including those with disabilities. The FDOE and testing companies ensure that attendees represent all students in Florida, including all regions, rural and urban areas, county sizes, ethnicities, and gender. Just so you get an idea of the participation in 2022-2023, there were 372 participants on 62 different committees, including content areas and bias sensitivity. So staff from FIMC participate to review items specifically for students with visual impairments. For example, can a picture be accurately portrayed as a tactile graphic or described without giving away the answer? So the item development process is done for FAST, BEST, Science, Social Studies, and FAA. And this process is identified in the Every Student Succeeds Act, in ESA, which is the Federal Accountability Act. So this is required for all tests. Okay. All right, our role, once the tests are developed, is for we read every passage and every item and give our suggested modifications that must be approved by the Florida Department of Education, including their Test Development Center. FIMC, with the assistance from 3 Braille reading proofreaders, proofreads all the Braille notes and Braille tests. If a manipulative is approved for an item, FIMC creates it, obtains approval, and then ships it directly to the districts that need it or request it. An item is one complete test item. And FIMC firmly believes that the proofreading should be done tactually, since that is how the students will be reading it. Braille notes, you said right here, it says Braille notes are the print documents that accompany the Braille test and list all the changes made to the print test during the creation of the Braille versions. For example, if instead of the directions saying fill in the circle, that would be changed to say write the letter.
And Karen, we have a question.
Sure.
Is the protocol required for each district as well? And I'm not sure what the protocol overall is. What
you mean this
is the process that the tests are going through that all the districts use? This is the protocol for the state tests.
Right.
I don't know if you were referencing district tests, but this is covering the statewide assessments that all districts are required to take. So yes, it applies to all of those.
But I don't know if districts follow this kind of an item development process or not. But when you get the test, it has already gone through this process. Okay. Did that answer your question? Okay, perfect. Right. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, FIMC is not involved in the test development process for district created assessments. I would consider it a good idea, but I can't tell you what every district does. So they'll figure that out. Okay, but this is what we do for the state tests. Okay. All right, so on to our Braille code information. All right, so this is not as big a deal as it was in previous years before the transition to UEB was settled. But this year, these are the assessments that we're offering in the different codes. So all of these are available in hard copy Braille, hard copy paper-based Braille, except Star Early Lit, which is not included in here because it doesn't have Braille due to its format. So all of the Fast Star reading, Fast ELA reading, Best Writing, and Social Studies, including the FCLE, are available in contracted Unified English Braille or uncontracted UEB. The FastStar Math, Fast Math, Best Math, and Science are available in contracted UEB Math Science, uncontracted UEB Math Science, contracted UEB with Nimith, and uncontracted UEB with Nimith. So the attempt is to cover all the versions of Braille that your students may use. Okay. Okay. Now, when you are requesting Braille tests, it's important that you know what code to work with your school assessment coordinator or your district assessment coordinator to make sure the correct codes are put in for your student. So you'll notice here that we start with the math and science codes, because once you choose your math science code, that will indicate your reading, writing, and social studies code. So for Fast Math, Fast Star Math, Best, and Science tests, choose the correct code here. There's contracted UEB Math Science, uncontracted or contracted UEB with Nimith. So it does both contracted first. Those are codes C and D. Then uncontracted UEB Math Science is code U. V for uncontracted UEB with Nimith. And then you'll see here for the reading, writing, and social studies, C or D indicates contracted UEB, and U or V indicates uncontracted UEB. Now, there is a way to order multiple formats for students using dual media materials. So contact your district assessment coordinator for information on how to complete that order. All right, UEB with Nimith, as we shared last spring, the new code in 2022 has now been finalized and published. So any new textbooks, as well as new assessment materials, may begin to appear differently depending on when the material was created. You can download the code book here at the BANA website. And this updated code may affect what is or is not included within the Nemeth switch indicators. Now, due to code updates, tests from different years may be formatted differently. However, everything in an individual test will be formatted the same way. Okay. Using Nemeth symbols versus UEB symbols. All right, Nemeth symbols will only appear in math or science tests transcribed into UEB with Nemeth. Right? If math or science type symbols such as superscript, subscript signs, negative signs, percent signs, degree signs appear within a literary context, such as on a reading or writing test, then these signs will be presented in UEB symbols. There will be no Nemeth symbols on those tests. Therefore, it's vital that students be taught all UEB symbols, even if they are using Nemeth for math and science. Okay, there is a FIMC presented webinar titled UEB with Nemeth Bubbles and Beyond to help people understand when Nemeth or UEB symbols should be used, and that is available on the past events page of the website. Okay. All right, Tactile Graphics also has new guidelines and standards that was published or finalized and published last spring as well. So this means that tactile graphics in textbooks as well as assessment materials may begin to appear differently depending on when the material was created. Okay, you can also download the guidelines for tactile graphics from the BANA website as well. There's a link here. And same as with the Nemeth statement, tests from different years may be formatted differently. However, everything in an individual test will be formatted the same way. Okay. The periodic table of elements is included in grade 8 science and biology 1. So make sure your student has time to get familiar with this version before using it on the assessment. Have them practice finding elements by atomic number, their abbreviation, or the element name. You will receive a copy of this with your sample test materials, so order them early so your students have time to practice. Okay. We will tell you how to order sample test materials on a later slide. Okay. All right. Okay. Access for ELLs. ELL is an English language learner, and WIDA testing is a term that refers to the various assessments for English language learners. So access for ELLs is the collective name for WIDA's suite of summative English language proficiency assessments. And access for ELL's test materials for grades 6 to 12 are available in UEB Math Science and UEB with Nemeth in both contracted and uncontracted forms. Okay, WIDA has developed test administrator scripts, and sample items for Braille versions of Access for ELL's paper. So the new scripts and material are included in the Braille administration kits. So if you need this, you can order it. Sabrina Reed is the WIDA Florida Access Manager for the state of Florida. Okay. Okay, for our Braille tests, we have 2 Braille vendors. The American Printing House for the Blind will be producing the Fast Star, Fast, and Best assessments. Starting this fall, they will use plastic covers and spiral bindings, and the Braille paper weight is just a little bit lighter than standard Braille paper. Pearson Braille Services will be producing the Science and Social Studies tests, including the FCLE. Their covers will be paper and they will have comb bindings. Their Braille paper weight is a little bit heavier. The tactile graphics will be may be produced in different ways, but will still be on thermoform paper. Excuse me. Since the paper weight is lighter for the test produced by APH, please make sure you're not putting anything too heavy on top of the Braille test that might flatten the Braille dots, making them harder for the student to actually read. The test should be fine for a single administration. So just be aware you're not stacking them too heavy on top of each other. Okay. Okay, we offer a place for you to provide feedback about the Braille assessments. Please take a minute and fill this out if you don't mind. You can indicate any quality issues related to the Braille paper, the Braille dots, Braille notes, and the scripts, tactile graphics, thermoform pages, page numbering, binding, page order. There's a space even, I believe, for you to write general comments. The survey is available year-round for any testing administration. It's the same QR code, same link. It is also located on the forms page at the FIMC website. Okay. All right, refreshable Braille. We all know it's coming. We just don't know when yet. The option of using refreshable Braille display with the computer-based test is still being explored. There are many logistical issues that must be resolved before this can be implemented. They're still working on which devices will be used or allowed, who will provide these devices, how will tactile graphics be provided. So stay tuned for more information. It will be coming. Okay. All right, now transcription of special document responses. Paper-based regular large print and 1 item per page student responses must be entered into the DEI or the data entry interface or the Renaissance Growth platform for K-2 locally at the school or district level. This is not a choice anymore. It must be entered into the program. So school-based staff need to be assigned the school data entry role in TIDE and the Test Information Distribution Engine. The recommended procedure is to have 2 adults participate. 1 staff member enters the student responses into the DI and another staff member reviews the entries to ensure accuracy. You can find additional information in the statewide assessments accommodations guide. There's more than 1 link to that in this presentation, but here's the first link. Okay, and let's see. All right, now transcription of oral and signed responses for all of these assessments, FAST, FAST-STAR, Science, Social Studies, and the EOCs. So if a student is giving verbal or signed responses for any test format, they also must be entered into the regular print test and response booklet and then entered into the DEI. Remember, oral responses can be listed as an accommodation on the IEP under flexible responding. Okay, and the same procedure applies. School-based staff need to be assigned as a SDE in TIDE, and then 2 people work through the process to enter that student's information. Okay. Transcription of Braille answers. This is reasonably new. So this is definitely one of the things that's been updated. This is for FAST, FAST-STAR, Science, Social Studies, and the EOCs. Brailled student responses can be entered into the DEI or Renaissance Growth Platform for K-2 locally at the school or district level for expedited reporting. Answers entered directly into the DEI will have scores reported within 24 hours, just like their cited counterparts. School-based staff needs to be assigned the same thing, the school data entry role in TIDE, and 2 people enter the scores. And then those materials, those Braille materials that are already entered into the DEI at the local level need to be returned as not to be scored. Okay. Now, responses may still be sent to the DRC or to Pearson, depending on the test, for transcription and DEI entry, but that will require additional processing time. So if it's possible for you to enter them, I would certainly consider it. Okay. All right. And now, transcription of Braille answers for best writing. Braille test materials, including the students' Braille answers, will be returned to the DRC so that to have contractors transcribe the Braille answers into the accompanying print test booklet. Do not transcribe best writing locally at the district unless the student is giving verbal or signed responses, and do not enter them into the DEI. Okay, this is for best writing. Those still get sent back. Okay. Now, for our students who are recording their Braille responses on the fast and best multi-part items, okay, students should very carefully list their multiple responses to the same item on the Braille paper, which is used to document their answers. Okay. So these can be done in a number of ways. The first option is the student can list 1A and then 2C for the blanks, and use the parentheses 1, close parenthesis A. This would indicate the response to the response transcribers that the first answer choice is answer A and the second answer choice is answer C. Students can label their answers as part 1A and part 2C, or students can list the letter option selected followed by the exact word or phrase. So as long as they put something that relates to the answer in there, that the transcribers can figure out which letter they were selecting. That will give them a better chance at transcribing the answers correctly. Okay, so make sure your student is familiar with how to do at least one of these for their test. Okay. Okay, the Florida Statewide Standardized Assessment testing window. We offer paper-based versions of computer-based tests during any administration window, and they can be administered to the students during the entire administration window. There is an established pickup date prior to the end of the window if the student if you wish for the student to be included in initial reporting. But they can be returned after that established pickup date and just be included in late reporting. But remember, if you enter the answers directly into the DI at the district level, the scores will be reported within 24 hours. Okay. All right, unique accommodations. In order to be approved for use during testing, a unique accommodation must be documented on an IEP or a Section 504 plan, be used regularly in the classroom, and not negate the validity or threaten the security of the assessment. These requests must be submitted using a specific form, the Unique Accommodations Request Form, that is provided by DOE and should be reviewed and approved by district assessment coordinators before submitting to FDOE. Okay. Each unique accommodation must be approved every calendar year by the Commissioner of Education or a designee prior to its use. Okay, so what that means is that new requests or resubmissions for unique accommodations must be made 60 days prior to the administration window and will remain in effect for the calendar year it is approved in. For example, if a unique accommodation for visual impairments was applied for in October of 24, it would remain in effect until the end of 2024. And new paperwork would need to be submitted to apply for the unique accommodation for VI in 2025. All right, so make sure you pay attention to the assessment windows and when you want to use these unique accommodations. You can contact Leanne Eldridge at FDOE for additional information. Now, also be sure that accommodations that must be provided as indicated on the student's current IEP or Section 504 plan. Care must be taken to provide a student with only the allowable accommodations permitted to that student. In addition, students with disabilities must be provided the opportunity to participate in practice activities for the statewide progress monitoring activities with appropriate allowable accommodations. So make sure you order their practice tests or work online on the online program. Okay. The use of assisted devices, magnification and electronic braille devices with storage capabilities and or internet access. They require the use of exam mode if that's included inside the device, or they require a security plan addressing how the features will be managed during testing. The security plan is maintained at the district level and is not submitted to FDOE, but it is essential and required that you have it. Okay. And you can look at this comparison chart for the devices at the FIMC's loan library page if you're interested in looking at the different features of the magnification or electronic braille devices.
And so I do want to chime in here real quick, go back one slide. So this is a little bit new information. So I think it kind of fits with what we've been doing, but so if you've got a student with an electronic braille note taker that they're using for testing, if it doesn't have exam mode, you need to make sure that you do the security plan and file it with the district. And like I said, this was added in when they did the new revision to the accommodations guide. So it would be a good idea to look at that section if you have any students using electronic magnifiers or an electronic braille device like a note taker on one of the assessments, so that you can make sure you know what to do and what to implement.
Thank you. You're actually exactly right. Okay. All right. I am now going to turn it over to Kathy and let her talk about test structure and implications for students with visual impairments.
All right, so we're going to look at some sample test materials for FAST and BEST to get an idea of kind of how do we braille these things. And the screenshots of the questions are going to be from different levels of language arts and math tests, just to emphasize some of the potential issues that students with visual impairments might run across. Next. So with the reading sample tests for grades 3 to 10, you have questions that are presented in a table format. And we're going to see it on the next slide. The students get used to this very quickly because they see it a lot. Regarding footnotes, so in grades 6 to 10, they will run across footnotes that's done with superscripts. And the definition will go on the next line. So you might have a word like hay bale, and you have a superscript 1. Then on the next braille line, it'll tell you superscript 1, what does hay bale mean? So that way the student doesn't have to go looking on the previous page or 2 or 3 previous pages to try and find where that definition is. It's on the next line. That's something we specify for the assessment since it's a time-sensitive situation. Make sure students are aware of braille formats for plays and poetry, because if they have not read something formally formatted for that, it may be a little confusing to them if they're not familiar with it. So, but they should be seeing this in their textbooks and that kind of thing as well. Okay, next.
Okay.
All right, so this is our table format, and I love the way it's described because this perfectly sums it up. So each row heading is going to be presented separately, followed by the corresponding answer choices listed vertically. So instead of a table format, if you have a Braille student, they'd read cats are grouped, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then underneath that, in your typical list format, you'd have A, passage 1, B, passage 2, C, both passages. And then the next row would be presented and so on. Next.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide. All right, there we go. For the math, there's now instead of response grids, we now have shaded boxes. And that's began in winter of 2023. In Braille, the shaded boxes are shown by blanks. So if it's Nemeth, you're going to see a low line or a long dash depending on the context. In UEBMS, it'll always be a low line. And so you'll have that instead of a blank or a box. Answers can contain the following. So for grade 3, they limit it to just whole numbers and fractions. And the fractions can include mixed numbers. For grades 4 and 5, it's going to be whole numbers, fractions, including mixed numbers, and decimals. And then for grades 6 to 8 and the EOCs like algebra and geometry, it's going to be whole numbers, fractions, decimals, and negative numbers. Any of that can be used in those blanks. Okay. And next.
Did it change? I'm sorry.
Oh. Got it. Sorry.
That's okay.
So the math and best DOC samples, you have questions presented in a table format as well. And it's going to be done the same way, and I'll go over an example of that. There are editing tasks that contain multiple blanks within answer choices, and then one or more shaded boxes for answers to be written in. And sometimes they can go through and combine all these formats. So we're going to look at some examples of that. All right, so here, this is a type of table formatting that's shown in all of 3 to 8 and the EOC practice tests. The row heading can be anything, including pictures, like a 3-dimensional figures or graphs, but it's all handled the same way. So you're going to have whatever is the row heading, whether it's a word or a picture or a graph, that's going to come first, and then the answer choices for that particular row will be listed underneath, and then it'll go to the next row heading, and so on and so forth. Okay. And now this one shows you an example of the multi-response shaded box question. The format for these types of problems can vary. Whenever there's something like an N equals or a C equals, then the Braille version will imitate that formatting. They'll actually have that same formatting with a low line or a long dash symbol, depending on the context in the Braille code. So please make sure your students understand that they can Braille the math symbols that were listed on slide 38 on their paper. There's no limit to the number of symbols used or how many Braille cells it takes up. That's something that used to happen with the RG questions, but there's not that limit anymore now that it's just writing into a shaded box. The Nemeth example does not show the open and close indicators, but in a real Braille test, they would be there. I just needed the space, so I didn't put them in. Okay, and I see a question. Info applying same way to access testing also. Okay, Ruth, it seems so you're asking about access. I'm guessing you're talking about the alternate assessment. An alternate assessment, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Alternate assessment would not have these complex types of items. They are available in Nemeth, both contracted and uncontracted, and UAB Math Science contracted and uncontracted, but they won't have these complicated types of questions. And please join us for the alternate assessment webinar, and we'll cover more specifics and things about those. Okay. Also, we are going to have a formatting webinar where we're going to talk about specifically how all of these different tests are formatted for Braille. If you're really interested in wanting to know the specifics about the formatting of the Braille, we're going to redo that webinar we did a few years ago. All right. And moving on. Okay, so for editing task items, it requires students to choose the correct word, phrase, number, or various things for each blank. There are 2 types of formatting in print for these, which we're going to see on the future slides. The students are going to write the letter of the option that is correct. Some of these items have more than one blank with the same item, so this is going to require multiple answers, and so students should be very carefully list their multiple responses to the same item on the Braille paper, so that the transcribers or whoever is entering their information, whether it's into the DEI or whether it's into a test booklet, which then later will be put in, to make sure that their answers are recorded the way they are intending them to be. These types of questions appear on grades 3 to 8 FAST math test and the EOC. So it can appear in any of them. All right, and then the Braille versions of these editing task items, regardless of what it looks like in print, is usually blanks will be labeled with like a blank and then parentheses 1, close parentheses, and then the next blank and then parentheses 2, close parentheses. The only exception to this is sometimes if they have a mixed formatting, sometimes it's occasionally better to present it exactly as shown in print than to put in the extra blanks. And we're going to show an example of that in a future slide too. For recording options, students, similarly to the multi-part thing, students could list like parentheses 1, close parentheses A, and parentheses 2, close parentheses C, knowing that, okay, the first blank is A, second blank is C, those are my answers. Students can label their answers blank 1, and then the answer, and then blank 2, and then the answer. Or students, they can list the letter and then give the exact word or phrase or whatever the answer is. Just the biggest thing is so that whoever's transcribing it can match up and know for sure what A, what B, or what C really is their intended answer. You can see the fast best sample tests in Braille for examples of transcribing these formats. All right, so here it gives you an example. These are the two ways that these editing tasks can appear. The one on the left shows that an editing task where they're using boxes. The one on the right shows where they're using blanks. Again, regardless of whether they use boxes or blanks, in the Braille, most of the time, it'll be the omission symbol for that code. So a long dash or a low line, depending on the context. All right, next. However, in a situation like this one, we decided, and after looking at it in Braille, this one would be much better off done as it's presented in print. And so this one is done as is shown in print. The only slight difference in the Braille, you would have the title, favorite books, then you would have the key, and then you would have the rest of the information. But other than that, this one would be done in Braille the same way it's done in print, and then they'd be interacting it that way. And for how the wording is changed, so if you look at the sentence before the key, it says for each box, fill in the bubble before. We would change that. In this case, we're keeping the box. So we would keep that for each box, write the letter of the whichever one is before, kind of thing. So the wording would adjust depending on how it was formatted in Braille. All right, next. On the fast math and best math tests, there are items with combined formatting. There's different types of questions within Part A and Part B. And so let's go to the next few slides that will show this. All right, so in this one, you have a shaded box combined with a editing task. So this item would, you'd have the unlabeled blank, which students are told for the blank, write your answer on your Braille paper. And then you would have a labeled blank. So it'd be, it's a second blank. So it's going to be low line and parentheses 2, close parentheses. And then the answer choices, the blank is repeated below it and the answer choices are listed below it. And you can notice in the first low line or Nemeth long dash indicator represents the shaded box and the numbered blank represents the multiple choice box. And then the third sentence would be modified to read something like, write your response for the first blank below on your Braille paper and write the letter of the correct unit to complete the sentence. That's some of how we would change the wording to fit with how it's reorganized and redone in Braille. All right, next. So this, the most intelligible way to present this in Braille was to present this using multiple blank formatting for the first answer choice and replacing the shaded box with an unlabeled blank. So the second sentence would be changed to read, write the letter of the correct inequality symbol and write your response for the following blank on your Braille paper to represent the solution to the inequality. And I only had room to show this example in one Braille code. And so I did it in Nemeth because I could make that more quickly and easily in ASCII Braille instead of using 6-key. So it seemed easier, but I like both math codes equally. And you could do this equally well in UEB Math Science. All right. This is another combined formatting. The most intelligible way to present this in Braille was to create it as shown in print, with the response box replaced by a low line or a blank, and then the powers of 10 presented in a box format like it's shown in print. The second sentence would be changed to read: write your response for the blank below on your Braille paper and write the letter of the correct power of 10 to show the value of the expression in scientific notation. All right, for the fast math and best DOC sample tests, some of the sample materials require manipulatives, and because they're sample tests, the teacher will need to provide those manipulatives. Encourage your students, especially with the math test, to read the transcriber's notes in the beginning of each volume, because it's going to give them the important information about what's unique to Braille for those individual tests. We made it a point of putting all of the notes that talk about the Braille codes at the end, so they don't necessarily have to read every single transcriber's note, but they should read the first few, because if there's something very unique and unusual about the formatting, that's where they're going to find information about it. And then at the end, all the codes are listed at the bottom of the page. All right, and this gives you a perfect example of how complex these some of these instances are. This is one of those, this is from the geometry sample item and this is one of those, the teacher of the visually impaired is going to need to provide the manipulative for the sample question. As far as ideas of how you could do this, I think a geometric rectangle could be used with a stick or a string or something to simulate the vertical dotted line with the top figure. And then for the other answer choices, 3D printer would probably be the easiest way to do it, but you might be able to get wooden cylinders or cubes and drill to clear out the center. The next slide is going to address manipulatives for operational tests, which will be shipped to the district by FIMC. But again, the other reason I like to show this one is it's a good example that you need to know the standards. You need to work with the general math teachers in the general education classroom to ensure your students are learning all the concepts that they need to learn. Because if it's in the standards, it can show up on a test. Another thing in the standards is using the compass to do a construction. It's another skill in geometry, and therefore it can be on an EOC. Anything on the standards can be in the EOC. And it used to be in the FSA geometry practice test. There was an animation that used to be in that one. So really work with your general ed teachers to make sure that your students are prepared for all the standards that they're going to be tested on.
Okay.
All right. And with that, I'm going to pass this back over to you, Karen.
Okay, thanks. Nice job. All right, so now we are going to talk about the operational test manipulatives. All right, and it is vitally important that you, as the teacher of students with visual impairments, obtain and read through the Braille notes that are packaged with the Braille assessments before administering the test. Inside the Braille notes, it will alert you to any manipulatives the students will need during the test. It will have a transcriber's note inserted before the question that reads, "Please raise your hand. Your teacher will provide the materials you will need to answer this question." And this piece is an update as well. This last bullet, the Fast Start K-2 Math Braille notes will now identify how many coins are needed for items involving coins. You as the test administrator will need to have those coins, but it will not just say you need a pile of coins. It will tell you you need 1 quarter, 2 nickels, 3 dimes. It will tell you exactly what you need now. So be sure and look at your Braille notes and make sure that you have the manipulative that it says you might, if it says you need a manipulative, please make sure you have that before you start administering the test. And then for the coins as well, those will be I believe those are the only operational test manipulatives you have to provide, but they seemed easier for you guys to provide them. All right. So remember that these operational tests are the statewide assessments and that are given 3 times a year, and all the materials are secure. The sample test materials, though, you can practice with throughout the year, and they are not secure. Okay. Okay. All right. So operational test manipulatives have undergone a little bit of restructuring as well. So there's a lot more communication related to the manipulatives, and it's located in the following places. Like we talked about in the Braille notes, okay, they're updated to include specific note to the test administrator that there's a manipulative for the item. The Braille scripts are being updated for future tests with specific directions about manipulatives when it's applicable. FDOE will be informing the district assessment coordinators about manipulatives during a monthly DAC meeting prior to the applicable administration. And FIMC, I believe this already went out for fall, but FIMC will send out a notification about manipulatives to the vision contacts and possibly even the vision teachers. Okay, there's a resource document as well about Braille manipulatives that's on the Florida Statewide Assessment portal. So you can go ahead and look at that if you would like more information related to the directions for administering assessments with manipulatives. Okay, these manipulatives that are required for operational tests will be shipped from FIMC to your school. Is that transcribers notes? Oh, right. Okay. Manipulatives required for operational tests will be shipped from FIMC to your school or district assessment coordinator. That shipping address is determined by the district assessment coordinator when they order the manipulatives. Okay, so make sure if there's a specific address that you want it to go to, that you tell them where you want it to go. The manipulatives will need to be returned to FIMC-VI. Please do not send them anywhere else. They will have a return label inside the box with the manipulative. And they will also include directions for administering the manipulative and will be included with the manipulative. All right, please check for these materials ahead of time so you do not end up with issues on the day of the test or during the test. Okay. If for whatever reason the return label is lost, please email one of us and we can get you a replacement. So much better. Okay, we definitely need the manipulatives returned to FIMC-VI.
And Karen, we had a question, clarify operational test. So in the testing world, there's 2 types of tests. There's sample and there's operational. So operational simply means this is a test given for real by the state. So this is going to be any of your PM1, PM2, PM3. It's just operational as a way to differentiate between that and the sample tests, and to be able to refer to every test that a student would take.
Okay. Okay, so here is a list of the operational test manipulatives for the upcoming administrations. So if you have students who are taking grade 1 math or best geometry this fall, there are manipulatives for those. This winter, there will be manipulatives for the STAR kindergarten math and Fast STAR grade 1 math. Spring 25, keep watching for updates. We will make sure to let you know when those are out. We will be having an update, an assessment updates webinar in January, and we will know for sure in January. Or we should know in January, right, Kathy?
Huh?
Do we know in January what the spring, which tests will have manipulatives or not yet?
Most likely we will know by then. And if we don't know by early January at the latest, I would say. It hinges on when we are finished reviewing the items for item review. So usually we're done by December, but every now and then some trickle into January.
Okay, so keep an eye out. We'll be letting you know. Okay, all right. Now there also may be times when students are allowed to create their own tactile drawings to assist with answering specific questions. These instances will be noted in the Braille notes, and they can use the methods that they currently use in the classroom to accomplish this task, such as plotting points or lines on a coordinate grid. Okay, so you can see here those methods can include many things that you already have and that your student uses, that graphic aid for mathematics, the math windows, low relief tactile graph paper with maxi dot stickers and or wiki sticks, or the new graph benders. You can use any of those things. The Draftsman tactile drawing board, geo boards. Okay. Um, all right. Now, occasionally there are complex tactile graphics that are included in these tests. So it's very important that you teach your students efficient and effective tactile graphics skills, especially from different perspectives. Okay, graphics on the assessments can be a top-down view, a side view, an enlarged view. Sometimes there are several related tactile graphics in one question, which could look something like this example on the next slide. So you can see here, picture 1 is a top-down view of a school's layout in a box. And then picture 2 has lines extending from box 1 to another box with an enlarged view of just one hallway of the school. Then picture 3 shows that there were lines extending from box 2 of another to another box with an enlarged view of one classroom. Then that view is then extended and shows an enlarged view of one student at a desk. Okay, so just notice there's a top down, there's side views, and that it can zoom in and zoom out. So make sure that your students are aware of how to read tactile graphics. Okay, there are reference sheets included with the Fast Math and Best Math EOCs. These reference sheets are included in grades 4 to 8 math, algebra, and geometry EOCs. There are no longer separate reference sheet volumes for the math test. There's a tab placed on the edge of the first page of the reference sheet to help the students locate them so that they can flip to them quickly when they want them. Okay. Oral presentation of Florida statewide assessments. The oral presentation instructions are provided in the 24-25 statewide assessment accommodations guide. It does give instruction and examples of what can and cannot be read aloud on the assessments. Okay, so here's some examples on the next slides. So you can see here, this is an oral presentation of fast ELA reading. You can read everything in the directions, then every section, everything in this portion may be read aloud to show the quote, and then the answer choices may be read aloud as well on this one. This one can be read aloud because, as it says, it's an individual sentence from the passage that appears in an item. Okay, I believe when it's more than 2 sentences, it cannot be read.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. We do have one question. Can we get reference sheets in advance to show our students, sighted students, see them in advance? You can obviously braille your own, but when you order the sample test materials, you will get the reference sheet will be included in the sample test materials. So yes, you'll have those in the sample test materials, formatted and looking exactly the way they will in the real braille tests.
Okay. Okay, so for this one, now you'll see this question is a little bit different. The part A, everything can be read aloud, the directions and the answer choices, as well as the directions for part B, but you cannot read anything in the bottom portion of part B because it's an entire paragraph from a passage. And so that cannot be read aloud. The student has to read that themselves. Okay. Now on the Fast Best Math, you can read the directions. The figure can be described. And there are more examples of all of this, as well as the question, then you can read the question. And there are more examples in the document for all subjects: reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. Regarding the oral examples, it gives an idea of how to do it, but the test administrator does not get a script or a list of descriptions for orally administering figures in the tests. There was only one test that we know of that gave a script, and that was either the College Board SAT or maybe the ACT. Currently, teachers get to describe these as best they can. Okay. On to computer-based tests. All right. Any student with a visual impairment who will be taking their assessments using computer-based testing platform should have extensive practice with the online sample test items or the online sample items and their accommodations before the day of the test. These accommodations can be very specific to the student, and there are some the user has to get used to how the system is laid out. Okay. All right. So all assessments are available computer-based. Paper-based assessments is an accommodation. Okay. And we've already talked a lot about them, and you can get them for all assessments except Fast Star Early Lit. All right, now the computer-based features for all students. So any student can use the features listed here. They can enlarge the print size, they can zoom, they can have color contrast, a line reader, or a highlighter. All right. The enlargement window and zoom accommodations work within the size of the testing window, not the size of the monitor. And currently third-party software will not work within the secure browser. There is conversation about the possibility of using third-party magnifiers such as Zoom Text and eventually JAWS with the computer-based test, but currently that is not possible. But just be aware that you try that with how it enlarges information within the testing windows, and that the size of the monitor is not how it adjusts the size of the text. Okay. Okay. Science and social studies. Grades 5 and 8 science are computer-based tests only with paper-based accommodation, of course. They can have 160 minutes up to a whole school day for any student who needs to finish. Oh, there it says paper-based accommodations are entered into the DEI, and grade 8 students will receive a computer-based testing worksheet so that they can make notes if they need to. Biology, civics, and US history, these tests are now fully computer adaptive and can be entered into the DAI. Okay. All right. So here is some additional test information and updates. All right. So here's the information on the accommodations. These are your statewide accommodations guides. The first one is for grades 3 to 10. And then the lower one is for grades K to 2. Okay. These can be updated throughout the year, so make sure you're using the latest version. These are the links that were put out this July. So if any updates are made, make sure you go to the website, to the actual FAST portal, and look for it there. Okay. Okay, scripts for computer-based testing and paper-based testing accommodations are only available on the Florida Statewide Assessments portal. All right, now Braille scripts are included with the Braille test materials kit. Okay, so when you order a Braille test, you will automatically get a Braille script. Okay. All right, now prior to the assessment, sample test materials. All right, so the sample test materials, please use them. Please let your students practice with them. Paper-based, the regular print sample test materials are now posted and may be printed. For all Braille assessments, the sample test materials are currently available to order in the test information distribution engine in Tide. They are not currently available for Fast Star K to 2, but the plan is for them to be available prior to PM2. Okay, so keep watching this fall. They will be available soon. All right, and make sure to teach your students how to use their accommodations. Okay, practice over and over with them. For the computer-based assessments, again, make sure they know how to use the features, determine the test settings that work best for them, and then teach them how to use them before the test. Okay, and check with your district assessment coordinator or the school assessment coordinator to make sure that the large print and 1 item per page in Braille practiced and operational tests are ordered correctly. Please double check with them so you don't have an issue on test day. Okay. Calculators for paper-based FastBest, EOC, and science testing. Grades 3 to 5, no calculators on math or science. Grade 6, math has an approved handheld 4-function calculator. Grade 7 and 8 for paper-based math, approved handheld scientific calculator. And grade 8 science can have a 4-function calculator. End of course exams, algebra and geometry are approved for a handheld scientific calculator, and paper-based biology, a 4-function calculator. let's see, this information is located on the calculator and reference sheet policies for the Florida statewide assessments. And here is the link for that right here. Okay, so you can read the whole reference sheet from the state of Florida about the calculators. Due to the functions that are not allowed while taking the FAST and BEST test, the following APH calculators cannot be used. Okay, APH no longer produces these calculators, but I'm sure that they are out there in your district somewhere, but they cannot be used on state testing. Okay, FIMC purchased Florida-specific Sci Plus 2300 calculators for use on the Florida assessments discussed on the previous slide. Okay, this policy does not apply for the AP exams, PSAT, SAT, or ACT. Each of these other tests have separate requirements about what type of calculator can be used. Okay. And while adjustments have been made to the calculator and reference sheet policy document to include the grade 6 math calculator, there have been no changes to the calculator policy. And all students, meaning whether they are taking paper-based or CBT, okay? So I don't know what that's from. Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay. Now, what can our students do? As long as this is an accommodation on their IEP, having a reader, as long as having a reader is an accommodation on their IEP that they use regularly, the student can provide the verbal input to the test administrator and then have the answer read out loud to them. Okay, so our students can have someone actually enter the number specifically. They have to tell the test administrator exactly what they want entered, and then that test administrator can read the answer out loud to them. Okay.
And that a lot of times especially applies with those 4-function talking calculators. A lot of times they don't have a square root button and they don't have a change sign key. And so it's in the helpful hints for using the talking calculator inside their Braille test books, both in the sample test and in the operational, that they can request the use of a regular print calculator for square roots. And if it's a calculation involving a negative number with that change sign key. It's also for the test administrator, it's inside the Braille scripts in several places, talking about that when it applies to the grade 6 math and the grade 8 science and biology.
Good call. Okay. Okay, so here's what the Sci Plus 2300 looks like that FIMC has purchased with the correct modifications that comply with Florida's requirements. Okay, they must use headphones for speech. There is a limited quantity of them, but you can request them through the loan library. All right, we did have a college math professor go through the functions and test the calculator. And in the book that comes with the calculator, there is a line through the trigonometry functions on page 18, making it look like this feature's been turned off. However, it has not been turned off. It worked and it is needed. So the rest of the markings in the book are correct. And FIMC can provide the calculator for testing purposes. So we also recommend that students have time to practice with the calculator prior to testing. So it wouldn't hurt to order it and let your students practice with it as well. Okay, so the calculator and reference sheet policy refers to 5 approved calculators and a list of prohibited functionalities. So the calculators on the approved list do not have accessibility options, but you can use locally approved large key and large display or talking calculators as long as they meet the functionality requirements. Okay, oh, and here's where it says it right here. If the talking 4-function calculator being used does not have all the functions available on the regular print 4-function calculator, such as square root or the change sign key, then the students can direct the test administrator on how to calculate the problem for them. Okay, and again, yes, just like Kathy said, it's noted in the Braille scripts and in the helpful hints for using the talking calculator. All right. Okay, computer-based testing calculators. Okay, there are online calculators for the tests that have allowable calculators. Okay, so there's an online scientific calculator inside the CBT platform for FAST grade 7 and 8 math, BEST algebra 1 and geometry, and For these CBT platform tests, handheld scientific calculators may be provided to all students. So if they don't want to use the online calculator, any student can have an allowed calculator. Okay, the same thing works for the 4-function calculator. There is one built into the CBT platform for grade 6 math, grade 8 science, and biology, but they may have handheld calculators as well. Okay, and the online calculator does appear in the CBT sample test materials. Okay, so for FAST, BEST, EOCs, and science, there are built-in calculators into the platform for the sample items, sample test materials. Okay. Okay, 24-25 school year is here, and the assessment schedules are available on the DOE website. So here's your link for that. But double check and confirm all testing schedules with your district. I know everybody does it just a little bit differently, so make sure you're checking with your district. And then here is just a link to the general FDOE assessment website, so that if there's anything that you want to look up, you can go and look that up in there. Okay. All right, any questions?
I've seen no questions in the chat.
Let's give them 1 second. But yes. Oh. Thankfully, there were only a few changes between spring and fall, so hopefully there's not anything too tedious that we covered today. Okay. All right, still feel free if you're typing to keep typing, but I'm going to go through these last few slides for you here. Okay. All right, so these are the contacts for accessible assessment questions. Leanne Aldridge at FDOE is an excellent resource, especially for those unique accommodations and any other questions that you may have about how FDOE addresses concerns. At FIMC-VI, you can contact Liz Anderson, the supervisor, or you're feel free to email Kathy or myself, and we'll do our best to get you an answer to anything that comes up. Okay. I still don't see any questions. Okay. Okay, so here are your QR codes for your evaluation and for in-service credit. We greatly appreciate any feedback you can offer, and we certainly will incorporate it into planning for future trainings. Our closing code is BEGINS with an S, BEGINS. So. And when you fill out this form, you will receive your certificate via email, which then you will provide to your district and approve both of them in order to receive credit. All right, both of these forms are also on the website, forms, upcoming events, and past events pages of the website. Okay, closing code begins. Okay. All right, and the last big news of the day is that FIMC has moved. We have a new address. We are now at Monroe Middle School in Tampa. So note the new address, update your contact information wherever you keep that. The phone number did stay the same, and I believe the fax number stayed the same because I didn't change that. So I know the phone number for sure stayed the same. So if you have any questions, feel free to call us, but this is our new mailing address. I'm correct? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tiffany. Here's a link to the website. If you are not receiving the visual field newsletters, feel free to sign up. You can click the link to sign up, or it's at the bottom of the forms page if needed, and you can find us on YouTube as well. Okay, does anyone have any questions or need any information? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you listening. And as many of you probably know, I am still new to my position, but we will continue to increase my knowledge of assessments every day.
You guys did such a great job. There's no questions. They're so thoroughly engaged and trained. They're knowing everything now, like you.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.